ya sea en computadora o este. Perfecto, muchas gracias. Adelante.
Gracias, Wendy. Buena tarde. Bueno, esta sesión va a ser, this is going to be a session held in English with the aim of open to a broader audience. And we are very delighted to have with us today Dr. Alexandra Kristich. She's going to present and introduce us to the publication of the book COVID-19 and Cities, Experiences, Responses, and Uncertainties from the Springer Nature editorial. What is and what could be the role of a city in the historical moment of this pandemic, and how should we plan a city's resilience to this crisis and those of the future? These are two tremendous questions that this book addresses, for which we are very eager to listen about. Let me introduce Dr. Alexandra. She's a full-time research professor at the School of Architecture, Art and Design of Tecamachalco. She's leading the National Research Group Sustainable Territorial Development. She has a master's degree in architectural engineering from the Kyoto Institute of Technology and a doctorate from the Osaka University School of Engineering. Her research focuses on sustainable land use, spatial equity, and urban conservation of historic centers, with a total of 10 years of research experience. She has active research collaborations with researchers from Design University Kobe in Japan, University of Colorado Boulder, USA, Zhejiang University of Finance and Economics in China, and UNAM, Mexico. She has published her work in the best international scientific journals, such as Habitat International and the Journal of Asian Architecture and Building Engineering. Dr. Kristich is a member of the National System of Researchers of Mexico and the Architectural Institute of Japan. She's coordinating the cluster urbanism in the framework of TEC's think tank post-COVID-19, focused on recovery and urban development post-COVID-19. Welcome, Dr. Alexandra Kristich. We are all ears, and the audience is all yours. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Milton, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted also to be here and present a little bit of my work to the professors and to the students of your school. I would, and thank you for the wonderful introduction. When I hear the introduction, I hardly believe it's about me. Wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. So I have been living here in Mexico for 8 years. Before that, I lived six years in Japan when I did my master and PhD, as Dr. Milton explained. So in this school, in the School of Architecture, when the pandemic started, we opened the discussion of how cities could face this unprecedented event of the pandemics, and how basically we could adapt to this new normal, what kind of lessons we can learn, and how can we improve our resilience so this type of phenomenon doesn't occur again. So I will just first shortly present to you the process of how the book came to be. Basically, the book is a collaboration between 4 professors. We are 4 co-editors of the book. 2 of the professors, including me and Professor Miguel Angel Montoya, are from the School of Architecture in Tech. One of the co-editors is from the School of Social Sciences and Governance of Tec de Monterrey, that's Dr. Daniel Lemus. And one co-editor is Professor Johannes Rechner, who is a professor in the Catholic University of Chile, and it's a current director of the Institute of Geography in the Universidad Católica de Chile, in the Catholic University of Chile. So having this network set up between these schools, we started to discuss the importance of gathering evidence of the responses of cities during the pandemics, and also posing some important questions for the future of cities. I strongly believe that the book is actually important from that aspect, that it poses very important questions. Maybe of course, we don't have all the answers. Maybe we have actually very few answers, but it's very important to start posing these questions for the future, no? So our idea was to set up a call and ask for contributions from different professors, from different institutes, from different countries that could help us analyze this phenomenon and the city's role in the phenomenon of the pandemics. So we used one very interesting network that is from Fudan University in China and Latin American universities. The network is called Fudan Latin American University Consortium, or FLAUC for short. And through this network, we distributed the call and we asked for contributions for chapters or proposals of chapters. That was in May 2020. So as you can see, it was just a few months after everything closed in the world due to the pandemics. So fortunately for us, we received during the summer of the same year 2020 around 30 articles, more or less. But in the final book, we accepted only 17 because some of the articles were outside of the scope of the book. They didn't refer to the questions that we like to pose in the book that I will talk about in a minute. And also sometimes we're outside of the geographical scope of the book, because the geographical scope of the book was basically the Asian continent, China. We have contributions also from Japan and Latin America. These were basically our main geographical context. So we received, for example, chapters from New Zealand, which in itself was very valuable, very interesting, but did not really fit in our geographical scope, which was to see how the developing countries, those that are at the forefront of rapid urban development at the moment, and they are facing a lot of questions with inequality or poverty, were dealing with the pandemics. So in the final book, we are presenting 17 chapters, which talk about 20 cities and 10 countries. We have 25 in total. There are 25 authors from 15 universities and different institutes. And the book also includes an introduction chapter and conclusion chapter. So all in all, 19 chapters. No. Also, we had financial help and help for diffusion of the book through the Observatorio de Ciudades from the School of Architecture of Tech, where a resume of each of the chapters was published each month. So if you would like to go to the webpage, I think they're still active, and you can revise those resume in a type of infographics with photos and 500 word resume of each of the chapters of the book. So the book, as Dr. Milton mentioned, was published by Springer Nature, and it's part of the Urban Book series of Springer. Can be bought online as an ebook and also as a hardcover. And until today, I was just checking that we had more than 3,000 accesses and to the book, and more than 1,500 downloads, which I think is pretty good because the book was just recently published. I mean, we started the process in May 2020, but the book actually became available in the market in end of December, beginning of January of this year. So in the last, let's say, 8-9 months, we had more than 1,500 downloads and 3,000 interested viewers. So to explain a little bit about, the concept of the book and what type of questions we were asking, in this slide, you can see some catchwords or keywords that might shed a little bit of light on that. Basically, the whole book rotates around the concept of evolutionary perspective of resilience of cities, which might be, some people say, oh, it kind of sounds familiar, but we have a lot of misunderstanding always about these new concepts. Basically, what we want to say with the evolutionary perspective of resilience is the ability of complex socio-ecological systems to change, adapt, and transform when they are faced with stress and strains. And why is that important? Because, you know, resilience traditionally comes from the area of physics and refers to material who, under stress, are able to go back to their original shape and form. So if we understand resilience in that original concept, then we have to discuss about cities going back to how they were before the pandemics. And this is not something that interests us in the book, because if we all agree that the present is not so shiny and brilliant for everybody in the world, that the cities are not the best, you know, places of equality and opportunities for all the citizens, then we have to think about this other aspect of resilience, or how can we adapt, no? How can we make it better? Or how can we use this as an opportunity, no? To improve the urban planning, design, but also public policy. So the final aim of this revision of evolutionary resilience of cities is to make, of course, cities more equitable, more inclusive, and more just, as the Agenda 2030 already encapsulates, no, in the 17 development goals. So the main questions that we ask in the city, and we ask the authors of the chapters to respond to, are first, what were the immediate reactions to the emergency? And did the cities look for short-term mitigation of impacts, or is there possibility to learn how we could deal with the pandemics in a mid or long term? Then to what degree processes, measures, or politics aim to recover to previous state, or they actually have some kind of, you know, visionary element of how to transform city in a better way? Then what type of innovation or restructuring can be observed or proposed? Through which interactions, especially among individuals and organizations, what kind of decisions were made for the improvement of the life of citizens? What kind of proposals for improving resilience can be seen? And how the topics basically of this urban resilience relate to the overall goals of sustainability. So based on this, we divided the book in three main sections, which the first one was responses that basically relate to the first two questions, or what kind of responses we have seen in cities during the pandemics. The second section is about experiences, or what can we see as a promising tool to improve cities in the future. And the final one was uncertainties, which were what I mentioned in the beginning, to basically pose the question of what aspects of city building and city life is most uncertain, no, in terms of equality and inclusion, and what we have to pay more attention to in future city building. So talking about that, I would like now to present, I have a PDF of the book available, so you can see basically the chapters that were included in the book. And I would start a little bit of tell you a little bit of resume of each chapter, and maybe if we have time at the end, if you are especially interested in some of these chapters, we could discuss it. So the first part of the book, after the introduction, we have a chapter that analyzes gated communities. And it's a comparative analysis between China, Beijing, Shanghai, y Colombia, in Bogota in Colombia. This is very interesting because, as you know, gated communities are a phenomenon that has become international almost. gated communities also exist in China, and the authors analyze typomorphological changes, no? And examine weaknesses and patterns of resilience from the functional and spatial organization of these residential settlements. Maybe I can show you, they have a very nice, let's go to the first chapter. You can see after the introduction, this is the chapter, the chapter about the comparative analysis. And I think the authors here, after geolocalizing those gated communities in the two mentioned cities, Shanghai and Bogota, make a typomorphological analysis between them. On the left side, you can see the gated communities in Bogota, and on the right side, you can see the footprints basically of the gated communities in Shanghai in China. So it's very interesting because the authors say that size really matters and the organization really matters. The main difference between these two types in these two cities is that the communities in Bogota have much larger area and they lack basically services. So what makes the Chinese gated community in the face of the pandemic more resilient in some way was their smaller footprint and also providing of services, because the gated communities in Shanghai on the perimeter have small shops that cater to the dwellers in the gated community, and also inside the green areas are wider and people have more easy access to those green areas that are inside the gated community. So when I say services, I think about commerce, buying things, but also access to green areas. So as we have seen in various cases, not only this one, that in the pandemics, access to services was extremely important and marked the distinction between who is resilient and not resilient, without and also made us question the concept of vulnerability. Who is vulnerable? Because before the pandemics, most of us thought the most vulnerable are the more poor, no, the one who are the poorest, right? But in the pandemics, we saw that there are multi layers of vulnerability, that not always who is rich is more resilient, because sometimes if you lack family network, you're more vulnerable. Sometimes if you're a woman, you're more vulnerable. So it's the question of age, of sex, questions of even typomorphological types of those spaces, no, become important and can define vulnerability in different settings, no? So I think that chapter is fantastic because it represents how architecture, especially us as architects and urbanists, can see how our work also has implications on vulnerability in these types of phenomena. No? The third chapter deals with revising, because the first part, no, is responses, how cities responded to the quarantines and to the lockdown in cities through tactical urbanism. Basically, it revises several cities, including cities in Brazil, but also some Western European cities, to see what kind of methods were used to improve city life during the pandemic. So, of course, was analyzed some pop-up bike lanes that were seen in Berlin. I think most of you also saw the pop-up bike lanes and pop-up pedestrian lanes in New York. They were also famous, where streets various streets were closed for pedestrian activity, recreation, and also cycling. Under the concept of healthy cities or stay healthy streets, streets were closed only for pedestrian or for recreation in other parts of the world. And specifically in Brazil, they revise some examples of urban gardening. As you know, also the food crisis is looming, has been looming even before the pandemics. And for the first time, FAO proclaimed that we are actually going back in terms of fulfilling our obligations of ending hunger and malnutrition after the pandemics. So if things were scary before the pandemics, now they're even more scary. So combined with lack of access to store and lack of access to products, sometimes disruption of supply chains in the stores, the value of local urban garden next to your house become hugely important. No, so they also discuss working with schools and with children to implant and manage local urban gardens in Brazil as one strategy. Might be short-term strategy. It depends on how the management, of course, it's organized, but as a first response, no, to the pandemics. Then in the following chapter, which is basically my chapter in collaboration with various researchers from China and from Mexico, we revise that idea of access to services again, but in terms of green areas and also stores. And then we compared that to a number of cases of COVID or mortality in those cities. We took as an example 2 case studies. One was Atizapan de Zaragoza, is the northern municipality of Mexico City, where I work. And the other one was Yinchuan, a mid-sized city in China. Of course, it's a very we cannot claim that there is a strong relation, no, between lack of access to green areas and cases of mortality, because the problem is super complex. We are not saying that it's directly connected. It is a loose relationship, but we just wanted to revise if there is possibility that there is some relations to it, because of course, you know, things like health of the community before the pandemics, public policies, access to medicine. There's so many different things, no, that can influence mortality. Of course, it's not only access to green areas, but we just wanted to use that one indicator to see if there is some possible correlation. And in fact, we did find correlation, because in Atizapan de Zaragoza, when we compared it with Yuncha, we had much more cases of extremely much more than 10 times more casualties of the pandemics than in Yinchuan. And when we compare that to the spatial inequality in access to stores of healthy food and green areas, of course, we found out that the fragmentation inequality in Atizapan is much more emphasized, no? And we did several analyses of proximity to green areas and proximity to stores to evaluate, no, this inequality. This is Yinchuan, on the other hand, where there is a more balanced, no, planning of services throughout the urban area, no? And unfortunately, in this last graph, we saw that even though from 10 years ago, the local government is aware where the most marginalized people live in the municipality, still the investments in parks are in the area where the more affluent or more high middle class people live, no? So I mean, this continuous inequality in planning could be, in the chapter we say, could be one reason of inequalities in the health outcomes, no, that were seen in the pandemic, no. And then we have 2 other chapters from distinguished Professor Yuan Ren from China, who discuss mobility management in China and asks for a more deep and multi-factorial analysis of risk in order to be able to manage the mobility in times of pandemics. Basically, he wants to draw the attention that we need real-time management of risk, which we basically do not have, even though there is a lot of amount of big data that can be gathered today. We do not have set up teams that can analyze that in real time and propose alternatives in real time. So he said that we need to have these alternatives, plan B, plan C, etc. When parts of the city have to be closed, where you redirect those people. So basically he wants to emphasize the need of setting up that kind of strategy for the mobility in the future, no? And then we have the professor, we have a professor from Japan. This was basically my professor in Osaka University, Hisako Koura, who in very interesting way says, asked the question, what does this mean? What the restructuring of cities means for cities that are actually shrinking? Because as you know, in Japan, we have much older population and the cities are shrinking and they're hollowing up like Swiss cheese, and there are a lot of empty spaces that are popping up now in the cities. And what does that mean for the restructuring of the city? So because it's in the section of responses, she's talking about how people reacted first in the pandemics in terms of where they went to live and how they managed the remote working. And she said there is a strong trend of moving away from central urban areas to the periphery, which is not so good news in terms of that shrinking cities are still having urban expansion in some way, instead of restructuring the inner core areas. But on the other hand, she said that there is a lot of potential in terms of lowering the stress on mobility and providing more green space inside these inner areas. Also was mentioned of possibility that many Japanese, especially young people, are turning towards urban agriculture or producing their own food or having some other second job aside from the regular job, because they're able to work remotely. So then the work of care for children, older people, and also activities such as urban agriculture become a possibility for them. So that opens up more opportunities in some way for young people in terms of employment and additional income, no? And then the second part of the book, which deals with experiences, it's a lot based on grassroots movements and also politics that worked and did not work during the pandemics. So, for example, in the chapter of the Great Equalizer, in Latin America, unfortunately, was revised that concept that the inequality during the pandemics basically became stronger. We became more separated, the cities became more fragmented, and the poor basically became more poor and more exposed to risk, as you know, especially in relation to the informal work on the streets that could not be easily controlled, ni stopped, no? So they are revising different indicators based on the Sustainable Development Goals to review the progress, no, of these indicators. And unfortunately, they say that the inequality, that the pandemics exacerbated the inequality in Latin America. There are different indicators that were revised, such as the sexual division of labor, colonial heritage, environmental racism, etc. In the following chapter, we also have a very interesting revision of what does domestic space mean in terms of during the confinement. from a perspective of biophilic design, this I think a very interesting chapter from our professor here in Tech, Carlos Cobreros, and some collaborators, which reviewed different strategies, how people basically managed to enter to incorporate green areas inside their house, and how the domestic space became space for work, became space for children's schooling, became a space for caring of sick people, hospital, and so on. No? So they made a very interesting workshop with the students, where each student kind of draw how he's moving through his house before and after the pandemic. And is, of course, as you can see on the left here, is how the space was used before the pandemics, and on the right, how it was used after the pandemics. We have a much more intensified use of the whole space and differentiated use of the whole space. Adaptation of corners for offices, adaptation of bodegas for children rooms, children playing rooms, and so on. And also how the green areas can be fit in the space or not, the need for green areas inside the house. They also revise interesting concept that maybe, you know, these micro gardens that can be installed in the houses, that just 1 by 1 meter of micro garden inside your house can provide sufficient food for 2 people during 3 months. It's an interesting concept, again linked to the resilience and to the urban gardening that we were talking about, but in a micro scale, inside the house domain. Also from experiences, we saw the rise of soup kitchens, especially in Latin America, and the wonderful work that many NGOs did during the pandemics of providing food to the most disadvantaged people, and reducing with that the possibility, the possibility of worsening the community health. We also have, I will hurry up a little bit, the impact on informal settlements. The impact of COVID in informal settlements was very strong, as we saw in many examples when we compared dense settlements from more developed zones and then dense settlements in informal settings. We found out basically that density is not the problem, because in the pandemics we used to talk always, because if there is density, that is the worst thing, we need to de-densify. But this analysis shows that density is not the problem. What is the problem is lack of services. That in Seoul, which is as dense as an informal settlement in Buenos Aires, in Seoul there was management of the COVID that was made possible by services and also the IT structure that they have, the warning systems that they have, etc. And on the other side, you have the same density or even maybe lower density in informal settlements, and the results were devastating because simply there are no available services, there is no management or capable local government to inform the people and to provide care. Then feeding the cities also was interesting chapter, because revise how adaptations were made in the ambient of supermarkets and food outlets, also street food markets, that sanitation become much more important, and there were protocols that were installed that hopefully will stay to prevent future outbreaks. To prevent future outbreaks in terms of delivering of food. And we have the final chapter from this section of experience, which was a typological analysis of nursing home. I think as an architect, again, I was delighted to see this chapter, because Lucia Martin Lopez and Rodrigo Duran revised different typological examples of nursing homes and provided basically evidence, no, how important is ventilation, orientation, separation of different functions inside a nursing home that reduced mortality in this type of care, or in this type of care facilities. This is the typological analysis, basically architectural typological analysis that they did, and they come up with a better model basically for those facilities, and that is a type of experience, no, that is very valuable, no, as a result of this book, no. And finally, in the third part of the book, where we discuss about uncertainties. We touch on different subjects. One of them was the cultural tourism. You all know that tourism was largely affected, no, by the pandemics, and how tourism again can lead maybe economic recovery in the post-COVID-19 scenario. The authors here revise examples of cultural heritage sites in China and how those sites basically, with the proper management protocols, can even lead to better economic recovery gradually after the pandemics. And then, of course, governance models were revised. Governance models, this chapter about Mexico City touches on an interesting subject, yes, how the response of the IMSS in Mexico and the federal government were quite different in managing the crisis, and how that provided a less efficient management of the pandemics. They touch on a subject that we all know in theory, that we need to be coordinated on every level of the government in order for the efficiency of the policy. And through the chapter, they provide evidence of these different responses that left the citizens sometimes confused, sometimes without knowing who to turn to, or without a proper care facility, no? Especially, it's exaggerated because some of the areas don't even have sufficient access, physical access, I mean, to facilities. And then when the government response is also confusing, because it leads to more problems, obviously, no? And the chapter 15 talks about building strategies and resilience in urban China and Brazil, from the aspect of access to water and inequality. Very interesting chapter because touches about one point, which is the toilet revolution of China. It is called the toilet revolution because in the last 20 years, China has been before the pandemic, I mean, China has been super focused on providing indoor quality sanitary facilities in all the apartments, in all the houses in China. We could say that 20-30 years ago, the conditions were really bad, especially in peri-urban and rural zones in China. But thanks to that toilet revolution that they had in the last 20 years, the authors claim revising data of access to clean water and mortality rate, that China escaped to be hard hit from the pandemics, but Brazil did not, because there are still a lot of areas in Brazil that do not have access to clean water. So I think it's useless to say to people you need to wash your hands if you don't have clean water or water to cook with, no? So, and I think this chapter 16 talks about international development cooperation, and of course touches on a very important subject on some authoritarian regimes that surged up suddenly during the pandemics, or more like strict approaches from the government that did not make it easy for international cooperation, no? That some political aspects got involved in the process of trying to help in the process of distributing medicine, distributing vaccine, for example, distributing health, even investigation. There was also there was the race for the vaccines that is also linked with the economical gain. So they are revising how international development cooperation in cities could be improved in the future to face this pandemic, because we were all witnesses that we do not have a strong international cooperation to face this kind of crisis. And I think in chapter 17, Evgenia revised the impact of reduced student mobility upon cities, which is, again, I think a very interesting topic, because we saw that many students who did not visit their home, their country of schooling, or that left campuses, left most of these student cities devastated, because they were depending on the income of the students and the culture of student renting and also buying, and the services, all the service industry that is built that is built around student mobility. And interestingly, they say that Beijing and Shanghai, for example, managed to make an urban image of themselves as safe cities, and they managed to keep a large amount of this student population, while other cities did not, and they have lost a lot of not only intellectual resources from the students moving in, but also from all the service industry around it. So it says it's an interesting lesson to be learned, especially for cities in Latin America or other developing areas in the global south, how strong is the impact of this student mobility faced with this kind of crisis, and how can we develop strategies to keep, and to attract talent, and because it's not only about reinforcing our intellectual resources, but also the whole economy that works around the student mobility, And I think those are all the chapters. And at the end, yes, we have more. Sorry, we have the vulnerability and the response of Bogota, and let's see. I think. Oh, I forgot about these ones. Yes. And then we have the conclusion. Basically, in the conclusion, again, we show that resilience is, we talk about how resilience is not an abstract concept, how resilience can and should be built, that it should not be left, of course, to luck, and that there are favorable signs of reorganization of urban functions towards, polycentric structure, towards reinforcing services in areas that lack them in order to have better spatial equity. And that basically that cities, again, were most affected by the pandemics, but at the end, they are, again, the poles of human development, and they are the ones who can provide the answers to this kind of crisis. So we did not find enough evidence to say, no, cities should not exist. We should also go to the rural areas and they densify, the cities. We did not find evidence for this. What we found is that just the rural areas, because they are less inhabited, especially in Latin America, most people live in cities because they are less inhabited, there were less cases, but does not mean that the situation was better in the rural areas. So again, we need to search for responses, and we need to search for strategies within the cities, and try to resist, the urge to create, again, unjust cities, and to provide incentives to community-based initiatives and incentives for formality in order to improve the future planning. civil agency is one of the important conclusions that we found in the book, that civil agency, innovativeness, governance, flexibility, especially city level governance becomes super important. And the ability to quickly react and to have that real-time, management of crisis becomes extremely important as a concept in urban planning. Well, that's all I have. Thank you very much. I don't know if you're interested in posing some questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christich, for this presentation. It's a very, very interesting book, and certainly it will be a fundamental source for all of us trying to continue understanding cities. I think from a personal view that the book covers a wide spectrum or range of cultural spaces and scales and different types of agglomerations, and in this sense it's not concentrated in just a single aspect or a single territory, but it covers a broad range of territories, and also I think it helps to put in question or to discuss some established assumptions, like the one, just two examples that you mentioned. For example, the assumption of the vulnerability, that the better off groups will be less vulnerable. That's maybe not. And the other one of density, that as I can remember, it was one of the issues that was very discussed at the first months of the pandemic, of the lockdown. We have some comments here. Adrian is asking, when do you think the pandemic will come to an end? Either that there is no longer any infected, or the virus is possibly there, like the flu or the flu. What scenario do you think it will be?
Very interesting question, and I would agree with the assumption that we have to live with this pandemic. Maybe we will not be in a pandemic mode anymore, but we have to live with this disease. Sorry, somebody that we will have to continue to live with this disease. I don't think it's in any short time we will get rid of this disease. As we saw recently in the summer, when mobility increased again, we had spikes of COVID. Hopefully, we can manage it with regular vaccines, or with the sanitary measures, that were implemented, that I think are here to stay for a long time. I can tell you, when I went to Japan in 2008, I was very surprised that people were wearing masks in the train. I was like, what? I was like so unused. It was very unusual for me to be wearing a mask. And this is because they had the chicken flu, they have the NH1 before in 2002, I think was. So Asian continent much before us was used to live with these sanitary measures. Europeans were not used to, and I think Americans also. So I think it's just, it's just a process. It's adaptive process. In the globalized world, we cannot escape anything that happens in other parts of the world. And we cannot cut, it's not so easy, to deglobalize. What we need to do is adapt and manage, So what I think is this basically what I showed you in the book, those protocols of safety, those ideas of restructuring cities, putting services, typological changes in architectural facilities, that in architecture and building facilities, those are the things that we need to do to improve the resilience. But I don't think that we can, forget about the virus or the ones that are coming. Hopefully not.
Thank you, Dr. Christich. Alma Rosa Moreno says, very interesting presentation. Where can I buy your book? Because it would be perfect to my actual research. I think she's researching housing during the lockdown.
Okay, I will put here wait, I will put in the chat, my email here. You can write to me and I will be happy to share with you. Maybe I can send you 1 or 2 of the chapters because I have the electronic version. Unfortunately, with Springer, I cannot, give you the whole PDF because there are some authorship rights and with them. The book can be bought online. Can be bought online in the Springer International page. It's part of the Urban Book series. It's a bit expensive. If you cannot manage to do that, ask me. There is a copy here in the Tech campus in Estado de Mexico where I work. There is a copy in the library. I will let you in and you can get the copy. Or if it is about 1 or 2 chapters, I can share it with you in a PDF form, maybe. 1 or 2 chapters, it's okay.
Thank you, Dr. Kristich. Edgar says, thank you very much. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, Edgar.
And I have another question, Dr. Alexandra. I found the book also very, very useful because it not also concentrates on the impacts or the problematic associated to the pandemic in the cities, but also offers solutions and proposals. And I found very interesting also the point that you touched in your presentation about this dilemma. If after a crisis or a disaster, a society comes to the previous state or to a better state, that I think that would be a crucial point of resilience. The question would be if you think that in this spectrum of solutions from different continents and cities, would you think you found more technical infrastructural solutions and strategies or more organizational ones or a mix of both? What would you think, Doctor?
Yes, first to answer, I think we found evidence of local changes in a local scale, let's say neighborhood scale or municipal scale, that were very positive, no? But mostly they were from civil engagement, from community groups, from NGOs. Unfortunately, we did not see the potential in government management in some way, no? And especially not on a global scale with these international relations. So what I want to say is that I think that this concept of adaptive resilience or evolutionary resilience is in the hand of the citizens in some way. It's in the hand of grassroots movements and in a local scale development. We saw some interesting cases between sister cities of different countries helping each other, but the nations of the same sister cities could not find a language to cooperate, but on a smaller scale they were more flexible, the governments to help. So that was found as a positive. Also was found positive grassroots movements, neighborhood interventions from citizens themselves. So what I see as a positive outcome, even though we are in this, I don't know, kind of a dark global scenario with the war in Ukraine and some kind of rising tensions, I see a bright future in a more local scale, in more like citizenship, promoting local citizenship and empathy, this ethics of care and ethics of empathy that is in a smaller scale. I don't know if that answers your question, but this is what I found out.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra. I think there is no more questions. I forgot to say that Dr. Alexandra Kristich is the academic advisor of the PhD work of Carolina Quintana, for which we are very happy to collaborate in this committee, Dr. Alexandra. And if there are no more questions, we say congratulations for your publications, and we are very, very happy for your presence today. And on behalf of the Escuela Superior de Ingeniería y Arquitectura, we say thank you, and we hope to see you soon again. Thank you, Dr. Alexandra Kristich.
Thank you so much, and write to me. You have my email. I am very happy to collaborate with students and professors. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and we'll close this transmission. Thank you.
Bye-bye.